It was 7:14 on a Thursday morning when Director Carla Weston looked at the man standing outside Gate 3 of Meridian Defense Technologies and decided, without hesitation, that he did not belong there. He was wearing faded Wranglers, a gray thermal shirt washed so many times the collar had started to curl at the seam, and boots with a split along the left toe that had been repaired, not replaced, with a strip of black electrical tape. He was holding a manila folder in one hand and his daughter's small pink backpack in the other, because the elementary school bus stop was 4 blocks east, and he had exactly 20 minutes before her pickup window closed. Carla Weston had been head of corporate security at Meridian for 11 years. She had escorted senators off this property. She had removed the son of a sitting congressman from a classified wing after he wandered beyond his clearance boundary. She had, in her career, developed a very particular instinct for threats, and an equally particular instinct for people who wasted her time. This man, she decided, was the second kind. "Sir." Her voice carried the flat, unhurried authority of someone who had said that word 10,000 times. "This is a restricted facility. Contractor access only through Building C. Visitors require a scheduled appointment and government-issued identification on file 72 hours prior to arrival." The man looked at her. Just looked. His eyes were the gray of old concrete. Not cold, not warm, simply the color of something that had been standing outside for a very long time and had stopped reacting to the weather. He said nothing for a moment that stretched 4 seconds longer than was comfortable. "I have an appointment," he said. His voice was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with softness. Carla looked down at her tablet. Scrolled again. The appointment registry for Thursday showed 3 contractors, 2 auditors, and a systems integration team from Dallas. No visitor clearances. No government consultants. Nothing that matched the man in electrical tape boots. "There's no appointment under your name," she said. "I'm going to need you to step back behind the yellow line and check the federal registry," he said. "Not the contractor log." He paused. Something in his tone did not match the boots. It did not match the worn collar or the little girl's backpack or the manila folder. Something in his tone matched a different kind of file entirely. The kind that did not live in the contractor system because it lived somewhere considerably more classified than that. She did not check the federal registry. She did not know she should have. What Carla Weston did not know, what she could not have known, because the information was sequestered behind 3 levels of federal clearance she did not possess, was that the man she was currently trying to send back behind the yellow line was Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Delvane, retired SEAL Team 6, 17-year operator, recipient of the Navy Cross and 2 Bronze Stars with Valor Device, and the only surviving member of a 4-man direct action unit that had completed an operation so classified that its existence was still officially denied by 2 separate federal agencies. She did not know that the manila folder he was holding contained a consulting contract authorized by the Department of Defense worth $4.3 million. She did not know that the Deputy Director of Meridian's Government Contracts Division had been waiting for this man for 45 minutes and was about to walk out to the gate himself. Don't look away. What happens in the next 24 hours changes what everyone inside that building thinks they know about power, where it lives, how it dresses, and what it sounds like when it decides to speak. Marcus Delvane had been waking up at 4:47 every morning for 11 years. Not 4:45, not 5 o'clock. 4:47. Because that was the time on the clock in the field hospital in eastern Afghanistan when the surgeon told him his teammate was going to make it, and somewhere in the muscle memory of his body that minute had become the hinge on which his days swung open. He did not know how to sleep past it anymore, and he had stopped trying. By 5:15, the coffee was brewed in the same $12 percolator he had owned since Coronado, the dishes from the night before were washed and stacked, and the brown paper bag for his daughter Nadia's lunch was folded at the top in 3 precise creases because she had told him once, at age 6, that her sandwiches tasted better when the bag was folded right, and he had not once folded it any other way since. Their apartment in Fairfax County was 740 square feet on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled faintly of mildew in the stairwell and had a parking lot that needed repaving. The rent was $1,180 a month. His disability pension covered $840 of it. The rest came from odd consulting work, The kind that arrived by encrypted email and required him to sign NDAs so comprehensive they outlined what he was prohibited from saying in his sleep. He drove a 2009 Nissan Altima with 217,000 miles and a driver's window that wouldn't go all the way down. He had been offered on 3 separate occasions by 3 separate agencies, a vehicle allowance, a housing stipend, and in one case a full relocation package to a suburb in Northern Virginia where the schools were better and the parking lots were paved. He had declined each time. He was waiting until the work was consistent enough to count on. And he was not the kind of man who spent money he hadn't earned yet. On the refrigerator, between a crayon drawing of a yellow house that Nadia had made in 2nd grade and a grocery list in his own careful block print, there was a photograph. 2 men in desert utilities, squinting against a sun that had no mercy, arms slung around each other's shoulders in the easy way of people who have survived something together and can still laugh about being alive. Marcus was on the left. The man on the right was Chief Petty Officer Dennis Rowe, who had died 22 months after that photograph was taken, and whose family Marcus still called every Christmas Eve. Nadia came out of her room at 7:02 in a blue corduroy jacket and mismatched socks, one with a frog on it, one plain white. And Marcus said nothing about the socks because she had told him that mismatched socks were actually a style, Dad, and he had chosen to believe her. "You have the folder?" she asked. "Got the folder. And the badge?" He tapped his breast pocket. She nodded very seriously, the way she nodded at things that required adult-level gravity, and picked up her backpack from the hook by the door. This was a Thursday. Thursday mornings were his appointment days and her school days, and they had perfected the morning like a military operation because, for Marcus Delvane, there was no other way to do anything. He dropped her at the bus stop at 7:09, watched the bus come at 7:11, and arrived at the gate of Meridian Defense Technologies at 7:14, which is where Carla Weston was waiting. By 7:22, Marcus was still standing outside Gate 3. He had not raised his voice. He had not moved from his position 3 feet in front of the yellow line, which was technically outside the boundary she had told him to respect, but which was also technically not the confrontation she had been hoping for. He stood the way men stand when they are waiting for something they know is already decided. Still, hands at his sides, chin level, the manila folder pressed flat against his thigh. Carla was back on her radio. A second guard, a younger man named Torres, had come out of the gatehouse and was standing slightly behind and to her left with a specific posture of someone who understood his role was to look present without making any decisions. He watched the man in the worn boots and said nothing, but his eyes kept returning to the way Marcus stood. That particular stillness that Torres, who had done 4 years in the army and knew what it left on people, recognized as something trained rather than learned. Inside the building, on the 4th floor, Deputy Director Alan Rice was standing at his window looking down at the gate with his phone in his hand and a feeling in his chest that lived somewhere between irritation and dread. He had been trying to reach Carla's supervisor for 8 minutes. He had been trying to reach the visitor coordination desk for 11. He had personally submitted Marcus Delvane's access credentials through the federal contractor portal 31 days ago, had received confirmation on day 14, and had sent a follow-up the previous afternoon to ensure the clearance was flagged in the gate system. It was not in the gate system. It was in the Federal Registry, exactly as Marcus had said, because Marcus had known it would be there because Marcus had done this enough times to know where things got lost and where they didn't. Rice pressed the elevator button. Down at the gate, Carla had finished her second radio call and was looking at Marcus with an expression that had shifted from flat authority to something slightly more guarded. The Federal Registry query had come back with a response she did not have the clearance to fully read, and that, in 11 years of security work, had happened to her exactly twice before, and both times the person waiting on the other side of her gate had been wearing considerably more important-looking clothes. "It says your file is restricted," she said. "Yes," Marcus said. "I can't clear you without supervisor authorization." "Understood." She studied him. He looked back at her with those gray concrete eyes and waited with the patience of a man who has waited in conditions considerably less comfortable than a Thursday morning in Northern Virginia. "How long have you worked with Meridian?" she asked. It was not a security question. It was a human one, the kind people ask when they are beginning to recalibrate. Marcus considered the question as though it were worth considering. "I haven't," he said. "This is the first contract." Carla frowned. Then how are you? Because the people who authorized it outrank the people who run this building, he said. Quietly. Without emphasis. The way you state a fact that requires no defense. Torres behind her shifted his weight. It was at this precise moment that the glass door of the main entrance opened and Alan Rice stepped through it. Jacket on, badge swinging, moving with the controlled urgency of a man who is professionally embarrassed. And the dynamic at Gate 3 changed in the way a room changes when someone walks in carrying the answer to a question everyone has been arguing about. Marcus. Rice extended his hand. I'm so sorry. There was a processing gap in the gate system. Your credentials didn't transfer from the Federal Registry to the on-site database, which is a known infrastructure issue we've been trying to fix for. It's fine, Marcus said. He shook Rice's hand once, firm and brief. The handshake of a man who does not need the apology explained. Rice turned to Carla. I'll handle the escort. You can stand down. She stood very still for a moment. Looked at Marcus. Looked at Rice. Looked at the manila folder in Marcus's hand, which she now realized, with a particular clarity of hindsight, was not a contractor's paperwork but a federal consulting brief with an embossed seal she recognized from a training she had once attended, and which was only issued by one specific office in the Department of Defense. Of course, she said. Her voice was exactly the same as before. But her hands had gone still in a way that hands go still when they are being very careful. Marcus picked up Nadia's empty backpack from the ground. He had set it down while waiting, because holding it for 40 minutes was unnecessary, and walked through the gate. Torres watched him go. Who was that? He asked quietly. Carla said nothing for a moment. She was looking at her tablet, at the Federal Registry entry she now had partial clearance to view, and at the 3 letters in the clearance classification field that she recognized from a briefing she had received 2 years ago and had hoped never to encounter in person. Nobody, she said. But she said it the way people say words they no longer believe. The meeting on the 4th floor lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes, and Marcus did not speak for the first 46 of them. This was not unusual for him. He had learned, in 17 years of operating in environments where speaking at the wrong moment carried consequences measured in lives rather than contracts, that the most valuable intelligence was collected before you opened your mouth. He sat at the conference table with his folder open and a legal pad in front of him and listened to 4 Meridian engineers explain, with varying degrees of condescension, why the vulnerability assessment he had been contracted to conduct was unnecessary, redundant, and based on a misunderstanding of their existing security architecture. The lead engineer, a man named Philip Greer who wore his expertise like a suit he had outgrown but refused to stop wearing, was particularly thorough in his dismissal. He had sent Rice an email 3 weeks prior. Marcus had read it in the brief because Rice had included it as context, arguing that bringing in an external consultant for what Greer called a theater exercise in federal box-checking was a waste of the project's timeline and an insult to his team's 18 months of work. Greer was not wrong that his team had worked hard. He was wrong about almost everything else. Marcus let him finish. Let all of them finish. When the room had fully committed to the position that this consultation was a formality to be endured and discharged as quickly as possible, he opened his folder, placed 3 pages on the table, and said 6 words. Your SEF has a 17-second window. Silence landed in the room with the particular weight of silence that arrives when everyone realizes simultaneously that they have been operating under a false assumption. Greer leaned forward. That's not possible. The electromagnetic shielding was tested in 2021 with equipment that was current in 2021, Marcus said. The interoperability gap in your biometric entry system creates a window every time the secondary scanner reboots. 17 seconds. Long enough to extract what you're protecting in here. Another silence. Longer. How did you? Greer started. It's in the federal brief, Marcus said. He pointed to the folder. Page 14. Rice was looking at Marcus with an expression that was the opposite of condescension. It was the expression of a man who has just understood, in full, why the 3 letters in that clearance classification field existed. That was the first turning point of the day, and it lasted approximately 4 minutes before the second one arrived in the form of a phone call. Marcus stepped out of the conference room to take it, because he saw Nadia's school on the caller ID and his body moved before his mind caught up, the way it always did when her name appeared anywhere, On a screen on a piece of paper spoken in a sentence, a biological priority that 17 years of training had not and could not override. The school secretary's voice was calm, which meant it was not the emergency his chest had already prepared for, but it was not nothing. Nadia had gotten into an argument with another student during lunch. Not physical, verbal. The other student had said something. The secretary was careful with her phrasing. About Nadia's father not having a real job, because she had apparently told her class about the consulting work and one of the children had repeated something overheard from a parent, and the something had been sharp enough that Nadia had sat alone at her table for the rest of lunch period without eating. Marcus stood in the corridor outside the conference room with the phone pressed to his ear and the fluorescent light buzzing faintly above him and the old familiar weight settling across his shoulders, the weight of being someone whose life existed almost entirely in classified spaces, which meant the people he loved most could not fully understand what he did or why it mattered, and he could not tell them, and that distance was the cost of the work, and he had paid it for so long that he had stopped noticing most of the time. But some moments the invoice arrived in a form he was not expecting. "Is she okay?" he asked. "She's fine," the secretary said. "She's in the library. She asked to sit with the books, which we thought was she's fine. We just wanted you to know." He thanked her. He hung up. He stood in the corridor for 7 seconds, long enough to let the feeling arrive and pass without acting on it. And then he straightened his collar and walked back into the conference room. He did not tell anyone what the call had been about. But Rice, who had been watching through the glass wall, saw something cross Marcus's face in those 7 seconds that he would think about later. A particular quality of stillness that was different from the stillness at the gate that morning, heavier and more internal, the look of a man carrying something that had no place to be put down. That afternoon, at 4:20, Marcus sat in his car in the Meridian parking lot and called Nadia. She answered on the second ring. "How was it?" she said. She always asked him first. "Good," he said. "How was lunch?" Was brief but specific. "Fine." He looked through the windshield at the parking structure's concrete pillar and said nothing for a moment, the way he said nothing when he was deciding how much of a thing to name. "You don't have to eat alone," he said. "I know," she said. "Anyone who says something like that, they're not your people." She was quiet. Then, "Are you coming at the regular time?" "Regular time," he said. She hung up first because she always did, because even at 8 years old she had somehow understood that if she was the one to end the conversation he would know she was okay, and she did it every single time without being asked, and he loved her so specifically for it that the love was almost structural, like something load-bearing inside him that the whole architecture of his life was resting on. He drove home in the 2009 Altima through Fairfax County traffic and sat at the kitchen table after Nadia went to bed. And for the first time in a long time he considered whether any of this was worth it. The invisibility, the where, the sealed file existence that protected everyone except the people who needed to understand it most. He sat with the question for a long time, in the quiet of the apartment, with a crayon drawing of the yellow house on the refrigerator visible from where he sat. He stood up, washed his cup, and went to bed. Some men are quiet because they have nothing to say. He was not that kind. The second morning arrived with the same 4:47 alarm, the same percolator, the same 3-crease fold on the lunch bag. But by 8:30 on Friday, something had changed at Meridian Defense Technologies. And it had not changed quietly. It had changed the way things change when a federal agency becomes involved in a timeline that a private company had assumed belonged entirely to itself, swiftly with paperwork, and with a kind of institutional gravity that has no interest in anyone's feelings about it. The call had come through at 11:47 the previous night, after Marcus had gone to sleep, to Meridian's general counsel and to the deputy director's personal line simultaneously. It was from the office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, and it had contained, among other things, a formal flag on the access incident at Gate 3 the prior morning, a request for an incident report from the head of corporate security, and a document that most of the people in the building had never seen and would not have recognized. A federal personnel disclosure form, issued under the Joint Personnel Adjudication System, that outlined the clearance, classification and service record of the consulting contractor who had been held outside Gate 3 for 47 minutes on Thursday morning. Carla Weston received her copy at 7:55 Friday, 10 minutes after arriving at her desk, and she sat in her office chair and read it without moving for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. The document was 14 pages long. The summary page was 1 paragraph. In that paragraph were the 3 letters she had seen in the gate registry the previous morning. And now, with the full context surrounding them, she understood not only what they meant but what they indicated about the man who had been standing patiently outside her gate in electrical tape boots while she made radio calls to supervisors who did not have the clearance to help her. She read about the Navy Cross. She read about the Bronze Stars. She read the service summary, the parts that were unredacted, which were limited but sufficient, and she read the final line of the active consultation authorization, which described Marcus Delvane as the primary federal security consultant for the Meridian facility upgrade and granted him access authority equivalent to the facility's executive director. She closed the document, opened it again, closed it. Torres knocked on her office door at 8:15 with 2 cups of coffee and found her standing at the window. "You saw it," he said. It was not a question. She nodded. "I knew something was off," he said. The way he stood. "You know the way guys stand when they've been in." "I should have checked the Federal Registry," she said. Torres was quiet for a moment. "The system didn't flag it. He told me to check the Federal Registry," she said. Those were his words. "I chose not to." Torres had no response to that because there was no response to that because it was true and she knew it was true and the weight of it was not something that could be distributed between 2 people standing at a window with cups of coffee. At 9 o'clock, Marcus arrived at Gate 3 for the 2nd consecutive morning. He was wearing the same Wranglers. A different thermal, this one navy rather than gray. The boots, still repaired, still standing. Carla was at the gate personally. Not Torres, not a junior guard. She had the badge ready. She had already entered his credentials into both the gate system and the Federal Registry, cross-referenced and confirmed, as they should have been the previous morning. She held the badge out to him when he reached the yellow line. He looked at it, looked at her, took it. "Mr. Delvane," she said. Her voice was the same. Flat, controlled, the voice of a person who does not use words to perform emotion. "I owe you an apology." He considered the badge in his hand for a moment, turned it over once. "You had a process," he said. "The process failed." "That's not the same thing." She met his eyes. Those gray concrete eyes that had not changed between Thursday and Friday, that looked at her now with the same neither warm nor cold quality they had held while he waited outside the line for 47 minutes. There was no coldness in them. There was also no mercy, and there was also no resentment. And that combination was somehow more unsettling than either of those things alone would have been. "The file," she said. "The federal file. The record of what you did. Is classified for a reason," he said. "I know. But I want you to know that I read what I was cleared to read." He nodded once, the way he acknowledged things that did not require further words. He walked through the gate. Rice was in the lobby, and beside Rice was Philip Greer, whose posture had undergone a complete structural reorganization since the previous afternoon, and behind both of them were 2 other engineers who had been in the Thursday meeting and who now stood with the particular stillness of people who are recalibrating their entire mental model of a situation. Greer extended his hand. His jaw was tight and his eyes were direct and he was clearly working very hard at something. And after a moment Marcus understood that what he was working hard at was simply saying the next sentence without qualifying it. "I was wrong," Greer said. "About the vulnerability. About the relevance of your assessment. About," he paused, "about making assumptions." Marcus shook his hand. "Show me the rest of the system," Marcus said. "Let's fix it." At 3:45 that afternoon, Nadia was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when Marcus came through the door, and she looked up at him with a particular attentiveness she had developed over years of reading him. Not his words but his body, the angle of his shoulders, whether the tension in his jaw had cleared, and she watched him set his folder on the counter and pour a glass of water and stand at the window for a moment looking out at the parking lot below. "Good day," she asked. He turned from the window. "Yeah," he said. "Good day." She watched him. She was 8 years old and she did not understand classified files or Navy crosses or the specific geometry of how a man stands when he has been doing something difficult for so long that the difficulty no longer registers on his face. She did not understand what had been opened and read and recalibrated in a building across the county. But she understood that he was standing the way he stood when things were okay. And that was what she needed to know. And she turned back to her homework with the quiet certainty of a child who has learned to read the things that matter most. 6 months later, the Meridian facility upgrade was complete. This vulnerability had been closed. The Federal Registry integration with the gate system had been rebuilt from scratch at the Department of Defense's request. And the consulting contract, originally written for $4.3 million, had been extended by 18 months and expanded to include 3 additional federal facilities, which meant that the man driving the 2009 Altima to school pickup every Tuesday and Thursday was now running an operation that employed 6 other veterans and had moved into an office suite on the 2nd floor of a building in Fairfax that had a parking lot with no potholes. He had not replaced the car. Nadia had asked him why once, after a girl at school mentioned that consultants drove nice cars. He looked in the rear-view mirror at her. "The car works," he said. She thought about this. "Is that the real reason?" He was quiet for a moment. "Some people spend money to show people who they are," he said. "Some people spend money to do what they need to do. I'd rather be the second kind." She looked out the window for a while. "Is that what you were doing?" she asked. "At that building? When they didn't let you in?" He watched the road. "Waiting," he said. She nodded very seriously. "That's kind of like the car," she said. And it was. It was exactly like the car, and he had no better way to put it, and so he said nothing, and they drove the rest of the way home in the kind of quiet that is full rather than empty, the quiet of 2 people who understand each other at the level beneath language, which is the level where it counts. 12 months after the gate incident, Torres transferred to a Federal Protective Services unit. On his application, in the space marked "Professional Experience that Shaped Your Perspective," he wrote 3 sentences. The last one said, "I watched a man be dismissed for 47 minutes and never once raise his voice. I learned more about authority in those 47 minutes than in 4 years of service. I decided I wanted to understand what that looked like from the inside." Carla Weston revised her gatehouse protocol. She is still head of corporate security at Meridian. She now ensures every guard on her team knows the difference between the contractor log and the Federal Registry, and why that difference matters. Nadia, at 8.5, still wears mismatched socks. Here is the question I want to leave you with, and I want you to think about this carefully before you answer in the comments. If Carla had checked the Federal Registry the first time, if the 47 minutes at the gate had never happened, would Marcus have handled the meeting differently? Would the vulnerability ever have been found? Or does a man like Marcus Delvain need to be underestimated once, in front of witnesses, before the truth of what he carries has